we're doing that now and talking about why AI has implications for us as communicators. So, benefits, risks, and we will see here in the next slide that China, as well as Russia, has identified the importance of artificial intelligence as part of its Made in China 2025 plan. Under Vladimir Lenin in the early days of the Soviet Union, Russia was transformed through electrification. And Lenin had quite a bit to say about the importance of electrifying Russia at that time. The Chinese approach is to try and do with artificial intelligence what Lenin did with electric power, and to use AI to transform or further transform the Chinese economy and dominate global manufacturing. Now, when we think about artificial intelligence, we tend to think about robots and robotic figures, and there is a company here in Auckland, New Zealand, that develops what it calls digital humans for customer service roles. We tend to think about AI as about automating things that we don't like to do, as automating things perhaps that we're not very good at. And it can certainly do that. But my argument would be that it's about much more than this as well. Some of those who talk about AI would argue that a combination of human capabilities and of AI systems can help make us better humans, better able to interpret our world and to act within it. And of course, that's a debate that is ongoing. It is not by any means settled. And I'd certainly welcome your thoughts on that. I thought it was interesting to see the results of a survey that was conducted in Russia. So if you like, we have the people called in the survey techno-optimists. These are the ones who tend to focus on the benefits that AI will bring and is already bringing. 48% of those surveyed were classed as techno-optimists who believe that science can resolve the social and economic challenges of today. We do know, for example, that AI systems can crunch huge amounts of data and interpret those, but the findings may be only as good as the training data that was fed into the system. Some people, of course, don't want anything to do with it at all. And like Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking, the late Stephen Hawking, the philosopher and scientist, don't believe that advances like AI can solve people's problems. And even go as far as suggesting that science can't generate any fundamentally new knowledge. It's the old proverb, nothing new under the sun. Then there are techno-skeptics who don't believe that advances such as AI can actually solve people's problems. But that's 28%. We do need to think about all of these categories in our own societies and to what extent the communication people in these different groups have both on social media and other forums of public debate about AI and related technologies. Because if Putin is right, we're going to see an increase in AI applications, strategic use of AI applications, even weaponized use of AI applications. And we need to be having a debate about this. I've used this kind of cute picture to say our role needs to be understanding, even at a fundamental level, as that is a basic level, both the benefits and the risks. People talk about the risks of AI, for example, the risks of inbuilt bias. In my country, our Justice Ministry uses an AI system in order to assess the likelihood of a prisoner's reoffending. And some would potentially argue that that system can be biased against those who are members of our Indigenous people. So there's the issue of AI bias, all sorts of ethical concerns that come into this as well. Our job, I'm suggesting, is to understand some of the issues and questions that arise around AI implications and to have a conversation about them. And I'm suggesting that the potential for AI, both plus and minus, is so significant that this conversation that I'm advocating should not only take place in the academy. We as communicators need to be able to take part in public debate about this topic. In my own country of New Zealand, the government already has a so-called charter for public sector applications of AI and to assure people that public sector applications are being made ethically. But the government has also said that it is going to have a strategy for AI and in New Zealand. As the strategy takes shape, and there are people working on it right now, that again is something that will become public and be part of a debate. I would suggest too that the WCA is one forum in which we as professional communicators, as academics involved in teaching and practicing communication, this is a forum that we can use to advance that debate. In my own field of public relations, the peak or professional body leading the field in the UK has an AI committee. They've produced a report. There is action going on there, but unfortunately, we don't see that kind of initiative being replicated elsewhere to any great extent at the moment. And I would want to encourage you all to seriously consider taking part in these sorts of conversations and raising the hard questions, because we should not naively assume that all will be well if we just simply trust the scientists and simply trust the governments that are talking about the benefits of AI. We need to apply the critical thinking that we apply in our research to the debate about AI and where it is taking us. Is it taking us to a situation where the politicians see it as a tool for control, such as Putin in Russia? Or is it taking us in a direction that will transform our society for good? Of course, the jury is still out and may be for a long time to come. But as communicators, my suggestion is that we need to talk. And I think with that, it's 6:15 my time. If we have some time for some questions or comments or disagreement, I would welcome that as well. Would anyone like to share their comments? Or have I stunned you all into silence?
Chris, it's just a comment, maybe a small sharing from Malaysia about the topic of AI. I think in Malaysia, we're really into trends. And
Yes.
even in education, we're into trends as well. So when we see AI, we see that government bodies being very supportive of such initiatives. However, I think the challenge lies in the implementation.
Yes.
Because even with COVID-19, we see students can't even attend classes because they don't have devices or they don't have proper internet
Yes.
connection. So I'm not sure how is it that we're going to champion for something that will benefit a part of society while suppressing another part of society who can't really afford basic necessities at this point. I'm not
Right.
sure how is it in New Zealand, where probably the income gap is much closer compared to
Well,
Malaysia.
there are disparities,
Mhm.
such as the disparity between people of European descent and those of Māori, our indigenous people, and that descent. So there are big disparities. But there is a whole area opening up of what some people call AI justice and AI ethics. The Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican, has even put out a so-called call around AI ethics. And so I expect to hear a lot more about these questions of justice and access to and implementation of the technologies in the coming months and years. As it relates to higher education, I saw the other day a call for a conference to do with just this thing of AI applications in higher education. I mean, we all, I think, have a smartphone, which is AI in a pocket, but as universities have to cope with very different circumstances than they did a couple of years ago, I suspect there will be an increased interest in how to employ algorithms and AI systems to make processes more efficient. The risk, of course, is that students feel that they are just pawns on a university's chessboard, being moved about as the university authorities decide. I really appreciate your comment. It's nice to see you. I see we have quite a Malaysian contingent here tonight. Would anyone else like to? Abdul, please. You're muted at the moment.
Yep. Okay. Hi, Chris. Hi, Jason as well. Hi, Moniza. It's so nice to see all of you here. I saw Sharizan as well and a few other people here. Well, artificial intelligence has been a topic that's been heavily discussed, but not specifically targeted in Malaysia, I feel, as how Moniza has mentioned. I think watching Social Dilemma on Netflix actually scared a few people. Whoa, the phone is tracking you. And it was quite interesting when people in Malaysia were afraid to take vaccine because they say there's a way where the government will start tracking where you are. Well, it's not the vaccine, people. It could be the phone. It's quite interesting how there's a lot of discussions on it. But people are talking about it, but they're not really going into it. They're not thinking of the real aftermath, the real potential of this, the real danger of this as well. I feel that personally, I always say that, Odi, I start thinking of something, it pops out immediately in all my social media, and I'm just thinking maybe I've WhatsApped that, but that's not necessarily so. There's so many things that's going on. It's all these big words that's being used: algorithm, artificial intelligence, big data.
Yes.
None of these terminologies are being addressed to the lay people as easily. I mean, we get it as communication scholars, but a lot of people are not getting it, and they are going to be highly impacted. Their data is going to be at stake. So there's a form of awareness or literacy that's there, but it's not been dwelled into. I'm sharing about the story of Malaysia, and that's my experience.
That's seriously interesting. Thank you. One of the things that I suspect that we lay people may see, or we may see amongst those who are not informed at all about AI, but who are exposed to debates and discussions about it, may well be that we get an emotional response to the idea of, the robots are coming to take jobs. Are we heading towards a jobless society? Even in the military area where you get so-called killer drones and autonomous weapons, those sorts of things, people who have been raised on a diet of sci-fi films and fantasy films even may well gather totally wrong or off-target impressions as to what AI is actually about. But my urging, as you've heard me say, is that we as communicators do what you were talking about before, Abdul, and that is dive deeper and consider ourselves as having some kind of responsibility to better understand what's happening so that the communication can be more effective. When I say communication, I'm not talking about necessarily the government's communication to the people. I'm talking about those who are on either side of the debate about benefits and risk, the techno-optimists and the techno-skeptics. We need to be able ourselves to have a part in that debate and even help shape that debate, not to a predetermined outcome, of course, but to a point where there's some common ground and people can work together on AI, what's being called AI for good. I appreciate those nods that tell me that there's something resonating. Would anyone else like to make one comment just before we go on?
So maybe, Prof, you would like to share with us, being a professional, being a public relations practitioner, how do you envisage the role of AI, in coming years?
Well, one of the things that is, well, two things. One is we are used to, or PR people are used to operating with networks of people that we build and cultivate. One dilemma is, how do you handle a network that is comprised partly of humans and partly of AI-enabled systems? That, by the way, raises an ethical dilemma. Where is the locus of ethical accountability in such a thing? So we are going to have to learn, as PR people, how to operate with networks that may include systems that augment human capabilities. We're also going to have to learn how to counsel employers, whether they are government or private sector employers, who are implementing AI systems and thereby transforming the world of work for the people directly affected. How do we counsel the decision makers in these organizations, and how do we communicate with those who are being affected? If I was a worker in a factory and I was told, well, we're bringing in some robots to automate systems, and so terribly sorry, but your job is going, I wouldn't be very inclined to smile on that. So the impacts, the consequences, both direct and in some cases unintended, are things that we need to have some kind of handle on to be able to provide sound advice. Did that somewhat answer your question? Okay, I think now we should move to our next speaker. And I'm just going to move along. Queen Lee, can you unmute and take us into your presentation about public opinion in modern times, please?
Okay, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, first of all, I would like to share my screen. Okay. Now you see my screen?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So I can start now?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Greetings from China. My name is Li Qingli, studying at Shanghai International Studies University, China. Thanks for having me here. Today, I will share my research on the provisional government of the Republic of Korea in Shanghai, focus on the articles about Korea in the English newspapers in China. I will present my research in the following part. First of all, let's come to the introduction part. To be specifically, there are main three historical backgrounds in my article. The first one is about Korea. The Provisional Government of the Republic of Korea was established in Shanghai, China in 1990, taking the French concession as the main activity area after the annexation of Korea by Japan in 1910. The second one is about China, specifically which the characteristics of Shanghai and Shanghai concession at that time. As Min Saw pointed out in 2008 and Lik Nam in 2010, Shanghai enjoyed historical trait as a concession, and its geographical feature of traffic convenience. As a seaport city, Shanghai showed cultural tolerance, political openness, and economical profitability. The last one is about Japan. As the scholar Li Jieyang pointed out in 2016 that the subsequent military force by the Japanese during the Manchurian and Shanghai incidents awakened China's national awareness of the crisis and aroused resistance against Japan throughout China. According to the previous study, even the chosen Governor General Office's official newspaper showed distorted images of the Japanese colonial rule. As the previous study pointed out, that there are many fresh facts in the contents of the reports of the Chinese press. So this research focused on the English newspapers in China and explored how English newspapers in China reported Korea during the expansion of the Japanese in Northeast Asia, and to figure out what kind of role the press played in the whole process. Based on the prior research, I proposed the three research questions, aiming to know what the sources of news articles on Korean reflected, what the specific characteristics of news topics in headlines were when these newspapers reported Korea, what kind of attitude these news media showed in their headlines. Next, I will introduce how I conduct my research in terms of method. I put Korea and Korean in the searching box with OR logic, set the searching period range from January 1st, 1990 to December 31st, 1932, which is the Korean provisional government in Shanghai. And defined the search scope as all fields. After deleting irrelevant document types, I obtained 7,349 news items. RStudio read the texts of all the headlines of all the news articles I retrieved from the database under the structural topic model. This model can be used for flexibly estimating a topic model in R package STM, and it can offer many functions to discover topics, estimate their relationship, and visualize the relation between topics. The number of topics actually can be selected by the data-driven approach in R. So I ran the function in R to select the number of topics from 5 to 10. Finally, I defined the number of topics into 7. And content analysis was also conducted in this research. 5 example headlines highly associated with each topic were exported to do the content analysis. Okay, next part is my result. The first result was reached by the sources of all the retrieved news. The table showed the sources of retrieved news. I listed the press name, reporting number, and percentage. It can be discovered that these retrieved news articles were made from two newspapers. The one is the North China Herald and Supreme Court Consular Gazette, and the other one is the China Press. American Thomas Millard founded the China Press. The North China Herald was founded by British Henry Sharman. British-American press competition occurred in China in the early 20th century. Thus, powerful British and American press strength in Shanghai was also discovered. The US newspaper industry in China was overwhelming in terms of the number of reports. Based on the number of reports mentioned, Korean, US newspaper took the most, which means the US newspapers in China reported most on Korean. In the previous study about Korean provisional government, their research only focused on one or two news events or focused on one newspaper's article. Thus, in their research, the strength of newspaper industry could not be reflected. Okay, the next result is these two figures now shown were conducted by STM packaging R, demonstrating estimate topic proportion and topic correlations. As we can see that topic 5 and topic 7 were the top two topics among all the topics, while they are netted alone, separated from other topics. I will explain that on the next page. I will focus on the netted topics first. The rest of the netted topics, the keyword of each topic involve 1 to 2 countries. They were Japan, China, Korea, and America. The Manchurian issue or events in Manchurian area netted these topics. The second characteristic of the topic in the headline is the headlines of these news articles related to Korea targeted the activities of the Japanese among all the netted topics. These articles deliver numerous acts of the Japanese, such as the illegal stationing of the Japanese troops in Manchuria, how Japanese attack a local official daily organ of the Kuomintang. It also covered an in-depth analysis of Japan. For example, how Japan was digesting Occidental civilization and how it changed fast after the Russian-Japanese War in 1904. Now I will explain why topic 5 and topic 7 were on the fringes of the net and have little relation with other netted topics. The headlines on the topic 5 and topic 7 have a fixed title content, demonstrating that every news article in these topics had consistent content. For example, we can see that the headlines on the topic 5 and topic 7, they all have Shanghai market reports. So fixed and serial news headlines may then take a large proportion in the topic. Under the topic, it reported current market situation and the trade demand for various commodities like cotton, silk, metals, sugar, piece goods. So here comes the last characteristic of the topic in headline. The trade in Shanghai area was of great concern, and reporting on Korean reflects the economic role of Shanghai in these headlines. Okay, the first column is high probability keywords of each topic, And I concluded these words into the second column. There is no extremely biased words or expressions in the keyword showed in the headlines. So we can conclude that these newspapers showed their attitude was neutral. Okay, let's come to the conclusion part. The articles about Korean in an English newspapers in China particularly paid attention to the acts of Japan, especially the diplomatic relation of Japanese with other countries, particularly China and America, gained a large exposure. And the oppressed Koreans demanded the independence of their country and showed their determination to fight against the Japanese misrule. From 1919 to 1932, during this period, Japan has already annexed the Korean. These English newspapers in China released news articles about Korean and focused on the common situation and conflict shared, even faced by China and Korea. This media delivered detailed news information, trying to be neutral in their coverage, which could also be seen through the keywords of headlines. The Western countries were called to pay attention to the fate of Korean and the situation in the Far East. The last part is the limitation of this research. The first one is that the R studio only read the headlines of all the news articles retrieved because the file of retrieved news from the database are scanned documents. Even some texts on them are hard to be recognized by human eyes. So the content of the news articles were 5 example news articles which were highly associated with each topic in this research. The selected period, from my opinion, may be a little bit too short. Only the period when Korean provisional government in Shanghai was covered in this research. I think the research period can be expanded into the whole process when Korean provisional government in China. Okay, I will finish here. Thanks for listening.
Terima kasih. Thank you very much. You've obviously done some incredibly detailed and interesting research. I wasn't even aware that there was a provisional government of Korea at that time. Anyone got any comments or questions? I think it's fair to say, isn't it, that the Korea-Japan situation resonates even today, that the memories of that conflict. Yeah. Any comments or questions for our speaker?
Maybe just a general comment. Thank you for that presentation. I think it's always nice to see research from other countries, and because it brings to light topics that we in other countries do not really pay too much attention to. So it really provides new knowledge to us. But while listening to this presentation, I'm just thinking the presence of foreign press in the Far East has always had a political motivation, and or political or economical, any of these sorts of motivation. And I'm just wondering, just for discussion, has these topics, I mean, these countries appeared in English publications as much as it did previously in today's press or today's media environment? I'm thinking probably even more, especially with the COVID-19 situation and the vaccination and stuff like that. Yeah, so having said that, what is the relationship between China and the foreign press?
Mm.
Or how has it developed over time from then until today, from 1919 until today? Maybe you could share some input with us.
Yeah, basically, I'm always thinking about what I did in this research, why it matters nowadays. But just now I hear your comment. I think you really inspired me because in the old days, we have no internet, and we can only news information from other country was by newspaper. So newspaper actually played an important role during the old days. Yeah, you just mentioned about the COVID-19. Yeah, during the COVID-19, the newspaper, the articles in the newspaper, maybe they were just published online, and there is no longer there is no longer paper newspapers, but we can also know that new articles in newspaper, they can deliver information to other country, and I think it's the same that we get some information about other country through the way by reading newspapers. So maybe I think that's the same in today's situation, because we read the newspaper online to know the information about other country. Maybe we can talk. Maybe we can put this in this way, that foreign countries coverage about another country. Maybe they can be maybe they can be more objective, or maybe they can see the same news event in another angle. Yeah, I think maybe I can connect my research more in the nowadays.
Right. Anyone else with a quick question? Where do you, let me ask a quick one. Where do you intend to take this research? Having explored your topic in a wonderfully comprehensive way, what are you going to do next with this sort of inquiry? What is your plan for this research?
Okay. Actually, the research question came to me because when I was doing my doing my course paper last year, in my first year, in my master's degree first year. So I was going to want to publish this newspaper in English journal, English academic journal, but I maybe think the implication of my research I still have to work more on the implication of this research. So maybe I need more time to polish my research and think more about its implication nowadays.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next topic is communication on Facebook, public response to provocative news. And this is a team from University Putra, Malaysia.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome.
Maybe
I will
Chilling
finish.
can stop sharing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, wonderful. So let me share my screen. All right, sure you can see the screen. So thank you, Chris, for this introduction. And yes, I'm Jensen from University Putra Malaysia, and one of my team member, Moniza, is here as well. This is our topic today, Malaysians' reaction to provocative news. Right, so as you can see here, you will see the top two, Facebook and WhatsApp, right? This is some highlights on social media use. And we all know that social networking media or social networking sites have been a popular way to get information and news, promote ideas, opinion, and also policy, right? And you can see here, based on the percentage, many people, they use Facebook and WhatsApp to get news and also for other purposes. Now, one of the reasons that social networking sites or Facebook, WhatsApp, right, particular, have been widely used because of its convenience, right? Now, however, not all information available on these platforms is useful and beneficial to us. Some information causes provocation, which in turn evokes negative emotions such as anger, anxiety, uncertainty, hatred, etc. Now, despite this, there is still a lack of understanding on how people consume and react to provocative news on social media, namely on Facebook, WhatsApp, and also Instagram. As you saw just now, Facebook and WhatsApp are the top of the social networking site used by people in Malaysia when they consume news or information. Now, as with other types of problematic content in the social media, we see provocative news is a cause of concern that is increasingly being discussed in society. So here come to our objective, right? Research objective. We would like to know, how do Malaysians react to emotion illicit provocative news, which touches on religion, culture sensitivity, and government performance on social media, particularly on Facebook and WhatsApp. So we define provocative news as news which attracts attention of the masses, touches on issues that are sensitive or deviates from cultural norms, elicit negative emotion, and possibly instigate social disharmony and uncertainty. So provocative news can also sharpen existing division by capitalizing on nationalistic, ethnic, and also religion tensions. So this is a definition of provocative news. So to measure reaction to emotion illicit provocative news, the two news articles that are likely to evoke negative emotion, for example, distressed, upset, worried, which have been circulating, right, were identified and also selected. So you can see on to your left, the Stimulus One news event features a provocative news story on race and religion, while on to right, Stimulus 2 on the news announcement is on government performance, right? So these are two different stimuli we use to investigate this emotion illicit provocative news. So we have a few items, included in our questionnaire. Beside the stimulus, we also would like to know how their response, right, behavioral response, their frequency of posting news, right, their news salience, what would they do where after they have read either one stimulus, whether they would share it, whether they would comment it or whatnot, right? So these are some of the items that we included in our questionnaire. So the behavioral response specifically, you could see we asked how would you react to news-related posts you just read about. So they can select one that best indicates, right, their likeness course of action. So they get more information about the news, or they just ignore it, do nothing, right? Or they share the comments expressing skepticism. So here are some descriptive analysis, descriptive data. So as you can see here, we will see quite majority of our survey respondents are females, and then most of them are Malay, right? And they also have a good education level because we interview, right, students, college students, so minimum they have diploma, right? And also you can also see their political interest here. They're slightly interested, right? I'm not so sure how the current situation of their political interest, knowing that our current political landscape in Malaysia is interesting, right? So we don't know. So perhaps this is something that future researchers can also find out, right? The current political interest. And also you can see their political participation, also 53.7% that support a particular political party. All right, so most Malaysians usually get news on WhatsApp and Facebook. When it comes to posting news, they are quite reserved. And we also see Twitter is catching up. So WhatsApp is the first choice for respondents to get their news, and followed by Facebook. And in specific, 6 out of 10 people are active news seekers, right? They seek news actively from these platforms. They're actively turning to social media in search of entertainment, social contact, and so social status, but also they are not just, right, looking for such news or information on entertainment, keep connected with their social networks, but also they actively seek news, right, from the platforms. Many Malaysians news consumers are incidental news consumers. Now, interestingly, 4 out of 10 are incidental news users, right? So we know that news media consumption is often considered an intentional action. People can be exposed to news unintentionally, right? So these users are considered passive and do not take cautious action in consuming or experiencing the news. So this is something that we need to take note of that. Another finding that we also found out, active news consumers always get their news on Facebook, right? Those who frequently get their news on Facebook are incidental news consumers. 7 out of 10 of the surveyed respondents who frequently get their news on Facebook are exposed to the news when they are on Facebook for other purposes. Right? WhatsApp is an important source of news for both active and incidental news consumers. Perhaps WhatsApp is perceived, right, to be a platform that provides fast information, even when people are not seeking for news. Now, this is interesting. Malaysians cannot discriminate their news selection mechanism. Now, there are 3 ways to get news. One suggested by algorithm, editor or journalist, the second, and the third by friends. Now, collectively, surveyed respondents there harbored moderate attitudes on news stories selected by editor or journalist, followed by algorithm and friends. Now, we argue that consumers who do not discriminate the mechanisms of news selection may be influenced by friends as well as algorithm, right? So, which would further establish a climate called echo chamber, right? So this is a situation where an individual is exposed only to opinions that agree with their own, okay? So the next findings that we found, exposure to provocative news on social media is a common state. So here we see that by combining the responses from the often, 42.2%, and always, 15.6%, these two response options, almost every 3 in 5 Malaysians are exposed to provocative news on social media on a frequent basis. Now, with persistent browsing on this media on a daily basis, the chances of these users getting exposed to a variety of news will happen. So this may seem alarming, right? But the fact that majority of the news consumers are aware about the presence of provocative news on social media, which is a good sign of media literacy. News consumers choose to seek for more information on provocative news reporting on an event. Now, both active and incidental news consumers are most likely to seek for more information about provocative news on a particular event, including those that are cultural and or religion sensitive. Now, the difference between the active and incidental news consumer is that active consumers prefer to get information about the news from different news sources more than to read comments of others. And we also see that incidental news consumers, they enjoy browsing on social media for the social and entertaining aspects of the media. So their interest lies more on what others' opinions and not for formal types of news reporting. So they find this is so, entertaining when they read others' comments. News consumers choose to seek for more information on provocative news announcements, right? Just now was news on a particular event. Now it's news announcement, because remember we have two different stimuli. So similar to their reaction on provocative event news, Malaysians were found to highly favor to seek for more information on provocative news announcement. So which has political bearing and can be exploited by parties with political agenda. So it's quite alarming that the percentage of active news consumers who would share the provocative news with friends in social media was higher than those who flagged the post, right? So such reaction would risk them into the echo chamber trap. Now, we also see there are 5 common motives of the different reactions to provocative news here. So you can see some that are not interested or they're influencing public opinion to promote, and many others. Now, the most glaring result is the reason as to why people choose to ignore or do nothing about provocative news. Now, this is because they are disinterested to get involved in the cultural or religions and the political issues discussed on social media, right? So they would rather just ignore or do nothing. So Malaysians dependent yet reserved on social media. Now, seeing as how there is a dependency on social media, it's not surprised, right, that they rely most on social media to furnish them with news on major events, compared to traditional forms of media such as television, newspaper, or radio. Now, even though, despite this, right, it has been found that most Malaysians were not interested to repost or curate news on social media. The majority of Malaysians felt uncomfortable debating about current events with others on social media. Now, this one, we see Malaysians verify the news on social media more than not, right? So internal and external acts of authentication are used in verifying news found on social media. And there is room for improvement of critical thinking in authenticating news among the others. Now, for example, there are still quite a substantial percentage who hardly question the motivation of a person publishing the news and check the tone of characteristics of the message. So closing remarks. Now, these results are preliminary in nature. So what we would like to conclude here is Malaysians' ability to critically consume news and their display of civic behavior when confronting with provocative news warrants further investigation. So it is worth noting and mentioning that future research should focus on this direction, because we know the rise of misinformation, disinformation, malinformation. So this really would give communicators, communication scholars, news perspective, right? And we are able to see the variance of how certain variables can contribute to people's behavior or intention of consuming news. All right, so with that, thank you for your listening. Thank you. That's all.
Terima kasih. Thank you very much. There's a question on the chat. Are you able quickly to respond to that? I'm just monitoring our time, but.
Okay, did you analyze use of Facebook according to age category? Let me reshare it. Sorry, I need to end it. Oops. All right, so we mostly ask youngsters, right, in colleges, in universities, and then we see, you know, their reaction to it. So in response to your concern on age category, for example, whether they are you know, Gen Z, Gen Y, we did not, I guess we did not do that. So we only concentrate on young people, right? And also, if I can't answer anything, I think my colleague Moni will also help me. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Jason.
Hi, Benakti.
Interesting presentation. Reflects a lot about Malaysian society and reaction to provocative news content. I'm just wondering, why would there be such a strong trust on the social media? In the sense that, is it because of a failure of traditional media, or is it because of they are unable to trust the social media, the traditional media to a certain extent? And the second question is, I like the idea of the echo chamber. I've noticed that what we have will be a society of like-minded people who are only reading things that are forwarded to them or algorithm-based, rather than an information-seeking community. Now, this is quite dangerous in a way, that if you start just accepting things, and people who would continue on finding other information is not as high there. So what we have is just going to be a society of like-minded people who might be fighting with one another, netizens, keyboard warriors in that aspect. And it's an interesting finding there, you know, like how will this continue on? We're no longer having an information-seeking community for that matter. Yeah.
Yeah, so I will leave the first question to Dr. Moni. Maybe Dr. Moni can help to answer, and the credit of echo chamber goes to Dr. Moni as well, and maybe she can further elaborate on that. But I will explain on that information seeking, this communicative action. Now we see a lot of research has been focusing on one side or area of communicative action, which is information seeking. And this communicative action scenario, phenomenon has been widely examined, not only in political communication or public relations, corporate communication, but also in health communication, my area. So we see a trend, right, coming, which we take note of current social media consumption pattern, in which people that do not just intentionally seek information, but sometimes they also unintentionally received information. And you will see some scholars that do not use the word like they use the word like information receiving, but very often, right, more recently, we see the word information scanning.
Yeah.
All right, this is not a passive, I would say, this is not a passive communicative action. Rather, this is also an active, but is in another perspective that we see, right? Information scanning. They use social media, but unintentionally, unconsciously, they got this information pop up, right, in front of them and on social media. So it's very interesting, and thank you for this positive note, yeah, Dr. Latif. It is good, yeah, for us communication scholars to dwell into different kinds of communicative actions, rather than we only skew to one end, which is information seeking. But we can also look up for other possibilities, right, of communicative actions that practiced by our people, or even certain group, for example, right? So over to you, Dr. Moni, to address the concerns, the questions.
Yeah, these are really good questions. And unfortunately, we have not had too much time to play around with the data. And that's something we really need to get to. That's why a lot of our answers may be speculative, or we played around with the data. We didn't find anything that was interesting, but didn't write it down. So right now it's really hard to pinpoint what exactly the issue is. But your first question, Latif, was why is there so much trust on social media? Does it mean that there is lack of trust for traditional media? I think in the Malaysia case, through observation, there is generally a lack of trust for traditional media, for formal publications. And we see this every time when the elections are coming around, where people think that the news reports are incomplete or not critical or not telling people the right thing. Whereas social media is so much faster, and a lot of news does seem to get leaked out from within the government or within political parties, and disseminated to people, because I think it's just faster, and that's why people do it. And you know, Malaysians like to, like I mentioned before, we like to be in trend. We like to be the first to know things, and therefore I think that when people get information on something new, they're so eager to share it because they want to be the first to say, like, look at this, everyone, I found this information. And I think this creates the echo chamber, because when people ask, is this true? And a lot of Malaysians would answer, it must be true. It was said by whoever, Professor so-and-so. It was sent by my mother. It was sent by my father. So we send information to people within our circle already. And of course, you create like-minded situations. As far as where information seeking is involved, and I fall prey to this as well. Like, for example, yesterday, there was an announcement that the EMCO, what is Enhanced Movement Control Order, was to be lifted. And the first thing I did was I reached out for Twitter. Why? Because I think Twitter is so much faster than traditional news media. Twitter is also, for me, faster than Facebook, and it's also faster than Instagram, which is not very informative sometimes because they focus so much on infographics. But Twitter, I relied on Twitter. And I noticed that the Twitters that I was looking at are people that I already know, I already trust, and I already place a certain amount of credibility towards. So yeah, it creates an echo chamber where, you know, we like-minded people keep on confirming each other's beliefs and attitudes. And we only do this when we only look for information, we seek for information when we're triggered by something, I think. Otherwise,
Yes.
we're all cognitive misers. We're just...
We are. There is, of course, a word for that desire that we have for something new, neophilia.
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 But, yeah, can I thank the team for presenting that very interesting research. And now we have the identity of young K-pop female fans in Malaysia from, let me try it, University Kebangsaan, Malaysia. Did I do all right? Excellent.
You did
So
well.
please take it away. And
Yeah.
I'm just conscious of our time. In about another 15 minutes, the next time block for the conference will start, but I'm not going to try and rush you. Please just go for it.
Thank you very much, Chris. Well, everyone's been talking about very heavy stuff, provocative news, and news in China and Korea, with regards to Chris as well, with your presentations on the role of technology and how it's changed. The issue that I'm sharing here today is on young K-pop female fans in Malaysia. And as much as it sounds like a fun topic, as we delve more into the topic and try to learn more, we're beginning to understand a group of society in Malaysia, a changing society in Malaysia, a group that is growing, that could have an effect in terms of societal growth and also how we can see ourselves in the future. I wrote this together with my student, and this is still very much exploratory as well. And we're still open to further evaluation of the study. Now, with basic introduction and background to Malaysia, this is it, BTS. I've learned a lot about the whole K-wave, the whole Korean wave from my students. I promise you that. And without realizing it, I've got like a few students graduating who did on the K-pop phenomena. Now, this study is specifically on the K-pop, but in terms of explaining how things are, the role of these groups coming into Malaysia. Before, we've got the flow from the Western music. I mean, I grew up with Western music entirely, but then after that, you know, there's the Latin wave that came in. There's also the Hindustani Bollywood wave that came in earlier on as well. Now we've got through the K-wave situation, and it's been really, really great in Malaysia. I think people are following it. BTS, Blackpink, and EXO has so many fan base here in Malaysia. But what does it do? How does it have an effect on society, and what has changed since then? Now, in Malaysia, a lot of this wave has started earlier on from Winter Sonata, and that's being repeated so many, many times. But we have moved on so much from the VCD era of wanting to watch something, purchasing a box set, you know, where we're just there instantly getting information. the recent pandemic has actually led to a greater flow of K-wave. I think people who were stuck at home during the first round of the movement control order, the lockdown, I think a lot of you has actually gone through Crash Landing on You, and so many had gone through Vincenzo and Penthouse and all, and somehow that has been therapeutic to a certain level. Guilty pleasure as it is, it does its part to society as a whole. Aside from that, Korean food everywhere, Korean products everywhere. So what happened is that without realizing it, there's a strong element of Korean inside of it. I mean, I never grew up saying, hey, let's have kimchi for lunch. I never grew up with that. But things have changed these days. I noticed that my students eat kimchi. You know, kimchi is just part of their taste palette, where we never grew with that sort of taste palette. But so it has changed a lot. I mean, a lot of us in Malaysia, UPM, UKM, we're very nearby. If you go to IOI City Mall, you'll be trapped among the many, many Korean restaurants there, which shows the influx of the whole K-wave. Is not just through music, through film, through drama, but also through the food products, through the the facial products, the cosmetics, and all that as well. Now, what's the problem? So these are the highlights that's been going on, that's always been visually there. I decided to cover up some of these images, but you can see them visibly. The obsessiveness and the interest towards the whole K phenomena has been said to be, in a way, against the Islamic teaching or the Malay culture in that sense. You see, when this happened in Malaysia, where young ladies wearing hijab, going to concerts, and they were hugged by them. And this is about young women wearing hijab, grieving over the loss of a singer, and also went for a candlelight vigil, and these are Malaysians going for a Blackpink concert, which people describe as, hey, this is not how Malaysians are supposed to be, this is not how Malays or young Muslim women should be behaving. Well, there's a lot of questions to it. People are questioning that. They are saying they're not doing anything wrong, but the older generations are saying this is not suitable for the culture. So these are things to explore. And you see the amount of people going to these concerts in Malaysia are massively, really, really high as well. So this is also something interesting. This is a visual I actually took from, I wanted to go to McDonald's for a quick latte, but I end up being stuck at a BTS launching meal, BTS meal launch, yeah? And this was just like at 9:30 in the morning. So this has actually shown, and if you look at all these women, of course I'm in Bangi, so that's quite highly explainable. So all these women are wearing hijab, queuing to get a McDonald's BTS meal, which does not carry any face poster cards of any BTS singers. But the obsession, they have to have it. They need to have it. And this came out in Channel News Asia, actually, in terms of Malaysian fans wash dry and enshrine packaging of McDonald's BTS meal. It's something that they keep. And, it shows an interest and a strong obsession to a certain level. So we're going into delve into the concept of fandom right now among young Malaysian women in terms of how they see all of these things. So I would try to just firstly understand the identity of these K-pop fans in Malaysia, and I'm trying to look at what are some of the issues and challenges with regards to these communities. Now, with regards to the theoretical concept, we look at based on Henry Jenkins' concept of fandom, the participatory nature of the relationship now. So fans are no longer just screaming at the audience. Fans are now feeling relatable to these people. This new generation of fandom is not just about, I think, guilty as it is, I think I grew up with some posters on the wall. And these people are so far away from me. I do not feel connected to them in any way. But this generation feels that they're a part of these people's lives because social media has actually brought them closer to them, has actually created meaning in the relationship. They could see these people waking up in the morning through their Insta stories, could hear their tweets every now and then, could see them going on vacation, could could even see them cooking toast and egg. So you have been a part of their life. So the participatory culture now is no longer just about attending concerts, but what do you do? So in Malaysia, I was made aware by my students that if one of the BTS had a birthday celebration, so all the BTS army would have a BTS birthday celebration among themselves. Now, this guy doesn't know that there's a birthday celebration taking place at over 20 places in Malaysia. So all these groups would gather and have that. And again, I tried to understand this as well, because I guess age brought me even further to the generation, but it just excites me to see that level. And one of my studies one of my students actually did a study on mediatization and the power of media in connecting people, and the amount of virtual concerts that's taking place now, the amount that Netflix is bringing people closer to the Korean phenomenon. So that's quite interesting. But when we're looking at fandom, I guess we do not look back at the issue of identity with regards to Castell's power of identity network society that still forms such a basis, and also Tajfel's social identity theory, how you're pressured to behave in a certain way just because it depends on the group that you belong into. Now, so I'm going to go quite briefly. I'm just showing some of the Asians literature, aside from the Western literature that I read, just to see what's happening here in Southeast Asia. I'm not sure if this is also big in New Zealand, but I know this could be quite a phenomena in Dubai, in United Arab Emirates. And this is really popular among Indonesian young Muslim women, Malaysian Muslim women, and Brunei as well. So this is quite popular, and it's quite interesting because of that twist. Yeah. We just did a focus group, and it's only to 4 groups. And I now discover that we actually did a study on the fandoms of each group. So there's a BTS, is one of the most popular groups right now in the world. So there's the BTS army. We actually gathered some army to ask them, what's their life all about? And we also had the EXO and Blackpink Blings, and also the multi-fandom groups that consist of people coming from different fan base trying to unite together and forming a form of solidarity. So we just did this with young women, undergraduate students, but we feel that it's not going to stop there. There's a lot of men who's into the K-pop scene as well, and that is also affecting them in terms of styling, in terms of thinking, in terms of how they speak, and there's so much interest in, for example, learning Korean as well at the same time. So some of the key findings here, of course, when you interview a group of people who's just obsessed with that, with the pop groups that they're interested in, they do know the history of the groups. They emphasize the importance of symbolization in terms of color representations. So purple reflects a BTS, Blackpink, to no surprise, represents Blackpink. And these color symbols actually shows to who they are, and they apply it to their life. And also, what are the reasons for them to be such great fans is mainly because of the music, they say. The second is on the personality of the singers. So it's not really them being great singers or great dancers, it's the personality and characters that actually affected them. So some people even say, which I find is very, very, which is a bad stereotype in generalization, they can't even tell the difference between BTS members. But all these students, all these groups of people could actually identify them, knowing each person's strength, personality, and characters. Their peers also affect them in terms of liking this. Some feels a bit left out if they're not in the whole K-pop scene. And some of them, as the 4th group of the multi-fandom group, they talk about trying to be a bit anti-mainstream by going against the typical BTS, EXO, and Blackpink, and thus form another group. But none of them talks really much about their ability to sing or dance, which is what we thought the entertainment industry was all about. So I'll just forward to some interesting things here. So the relationship between fandoms as well, there's a lot of cyber wars taking place, and ARMY tends to be described as over-competitive and tend to create issues. And fandoms, there's a call for fandoms needing to be supportive of one another rather than trying to be overly competitive. some of the issues and challenges faced by these young women is first financial. Yeah, they've spent a lot of money on concerts, on access, on purchases, on buying things online, on trying to fit in. The other thing is family acceptance. So parents still have a very negative connotation on what K-pop's all about and what the Korean wave's all about. So once that happens, that also brings into the parents tends to use religion as an issue. So rather than religion and education seems to be the two things. So you should be focusing on your study and not focus on K-pop, and you should be praying and not focusing on K-pop music, which is two whole different things. Acceptance from others. I think this is quite interesting. There are people who could not accept you for being a K-pop fan, and this could be people who start forming groups, trying to identify, trying to find a sense of belonging elsewhere by like-minded people as well. So what happens here as well is that we've learned that there has been a strong interest in learning Korean. When I checked with my university and a couple of universities, all their Korean language courses will be the first to be filled up. I'm not sure about UPM, but modern languages as well there. But Korean language is the most popular. And what's interesting now is that they are learning Korean languages and using it as part of their TikTok, as part of their social media, trying to represent that. Now, these are people who's never been to Korea or has never even met a Korean person, but they've learned. And I had a student, I remember, who actually won a competition, a Korean-speaking competition, just by learning through watching K-drama and listening to music. So this things that are arising of these new groups. They're also coming up with creative works and projects. The amount of makeup tutorials, dressing styles, and all this, you would see women wearing a hanbok with a hijab. You would see women styling themselves Korean way. And if you notice, Korean colors tend to be a bit more lighter. And if you're trying to oppose to a more darker colors, how Islamic Arabic colors are slightly very different. But now you see new waves in the way people dress and the way they present themselves in terms of makeup and the clothes. And the last one is about respecting and learning of other cultures. I don't think our parents' age are those that could accept Korean food easily, but the younger generations would meet up at Korean restaurants and have discussions over Korean restaurants. And if you go to a lot of these Korean restaurants, it will be filled with young people, having those knowledge. Now, this is something that's not as common in Malaysia as it could be as in other countries, yeah? So that's a bit of a difference. So these are some of the quotes that I got. It's not worth it for fandoms to fight. Just enjoy. Because of attitudes like this, it brings a negative perception of K-pop in general and make non-K-poppers, there's a word for that, have a negative perception on us. Friends who did not like K-pop, they will say, why do you like all this plastic? So they're referred to as plastics. They're referring to the groups because they assume that all these people would have gone through a lot of plastic surgery as well, and they're also fake in that matter. The like to belittle other fandoms, the songs are horrible now. My mom would ask me to stop listening to the music and go and pray, and because of how they treat their fans. The fans always say that EXO gave them strength and EXO is their muse. As to how we highly regard them as musicians, this is also how they regard us as fans. Wow, how did they were able to make them feel millions of people that important is amazing. So, just because we like K-pop doesn't make us Korean. So that's quite interesting to see the appreciation of culture. In terms of some key points discussion here, the K-pop identity is a form of an extension of self. It's just a great escapism. And as much as we're saying young people are guilty of this, the age gap is getting greater and greater. You can find 40-year-old women leading some of these fandoms as well and trying to share the importance of this K-pop music. The future of fandom. Now, will K-pop die off? Well, maybe one day. Right now, no way, but maybe one day. But right now, it's really making it smart. If you could see, BTS is doing well even in the US, hitting the Billboard Hot 100, reaching #1, which is very difficult task to do. And people are aware of them. They're on all the late night shows in the US, and they've been making their marks as well. So is this something that we're supposed to be worried about? Well, Malaysia has always had the look east policy with regards to Japan, and it's always been good to find Asian heroes rather than Western heroes, to some people say, as Asian values are rather more similar than Malaysian values. It's also interesting to see how they've created a sense of belonging, a sense of unity with regards to society, with regards to finding groups, people of common interest. The religious differences is something that we need to educate, but you see, the young people are aware. Now, I've had a student who's presenting in tomorrow, and she did an ethnographic study where she attended all these concerts. Yeah, her PhD was actually attending K-pop concerts. And looking at the women who actually, during the prayer time, they would just go back, take off their makeup, go and pray, and come back in, and trying to say that, hey, we're okay with all this, so stop making us look bad just because some girls were viewed as such earlier on. The inter-ethnic youth of Malaysia are united by all this. So this could be a great call for, if you could see, this a Chinese boys in Malaysia who's supporting K-pop group there as well. And this could be a sense of uniting Malaysian youth to a certain aspect as well. With regards to hybrid of Korean Muslimah hijabistas, it's quite interesting because what you have now is a group of women who are also interested to talk about world issues, about ideas with regards to Korea specifically, and at the same time, they are actually open to different ways of positioning themselves. The power of technology and how mediatization has played a role in our society, the issue and fantasy and reality, especially when the fans feel so connected to the K-pop star. That's something to look at as well. But at a bigger scale as well, we have to look at how this will affect the local creative scene. Our people are becoming creative now through TikTok, trying to share their expressions with regards to the K phenomena. But maybe this is something that we can look on in terms of strengthening the local cultural and creative scene as well. So, this research is still at the exploratory stage, and we hope to actually expand it further to look at other ethnicity and other groups as well. So, sorry if I took some time there, but thank you for attending this session.
Okay. All right. I'm joining now. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Terima kasih. I'm conscious that the next time block for the conference has started. Yeah. But I think I'm sure we have time for you to answer the question that's just popped up on the chat. You able to split?
All right, yeah. Okay, Dr. Sharizan from UM. Okay, I know that BTS is considered as a global sensation. Do you think the fans is rather producing a global identity, being a K-pop fan? Well, Akmi is here. My PhD student is here, Akmi. Would you like to share some input on ARMYs there? I'm not passing the baton to you, but you've been doing a lot of research specifically with the ARMYs.
Hi, sorry, work from home situation here. Dr. Sharizan, from my research, I find out that when it comes to K-pop and the identity of the fans, it is linked to what mediatization and culture discuss on identity, which called identity bricolage or bricolage identity. This identity is formed by the unity of people that have the same interest, or in this case, BTS. Yes, they do have a bricolage identity. If you look at Color Purple, if you look at how wordplay, for examples, they are using, instead of sarang he, they are using bora he. Bora is purple, which means that I purple you. So yes, they do create their own global identity, and this is called the identity of bricolage.
Yeah.
So
thank you
sorry,
very much.
I hijacked Dr. Latif's presentation.
No, thank you so much for that. Friends, I'm conscious that the second time block for today has just begun. So I want to thank you all very much for your participation and for sharing with us all some fascinating research. As I was saying earlier to a couple of my Malaysian friends, I do hope that at some stage borders will reopen so that from this southern country, I can come north and enjoy some hot food, hot in the sense of spicy, which I greatly enjoy. But thank you so much for sharing such a breadth of research and with such interesting findings. I hope the rest of your day goes extremely well, and I should encourage you now to join the next session in the conference. So ciao for now, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. See ya.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
See you.